there's a shamanic transfer of energy that occurs during these sessions. I routinely leave the clinic feeling this positive energy that is something I just haven't felt since I was really young and first got into healthcare as a student and as an early trainee.
Three, two, one. Liftoff.
Welcome back to the Ketamine Startup Podcast. This is where we talk about how to start up a ketamine infusion clinic, how to market it, and more. In this episode, we sit down with two incredible practitioners who created something really special in Ohio. Dr. Jack Hay is an emergency medicine physician with over 20 years of experience, and Dr. Harry Pepper is a psychologist with 30 years in the field. Together, they own and run Oberlin Ketamine Clinic. And what makes their partnership unique is how they've combined their complementary skills, emergency medicine expertise, with psychological integration and coaching. We dive into their journey from COVID burnout to opening their clinic, the major obstacles they faced along the way, and their innovative approach to patient care. You'll hear about Dr. Pepper's personalized music curation process that challenges conventional wisdom, their intention-setting practices, and the difference between coaching and therapy in the ketamine space. We learned a lot during this conversation and hope you do too. Now let's jump into the episode.
Welcome back to the Ketamine Startup Podcast, everyone. We're thrilled you are here today. And I'm super excited about our next two guests who own the Oberlin Ketamine Clinic in Ohio. So we'll get started, and we'll start with Dr. Jack Hay, followed by Dr. Harry Pepper. But we would love to hear a little bit about you and your background.
Well, hi, Sam. Really appreciate the opportunity to be on here. Thanks for inviting us. I'm an emergency medicine physician, residency trained, board certified. At least that's my healthcare training, right, description. But I'm initially from Southern California, moved to Indiana to go to the University of Notre Dame, and then went to Missouri to go to medical school and ended up in the Cleveland area doing residency, and then met an Italian wife with a large Italian family. And now I live here with my 3 kids, and I've been working in emergency medicine for the last 20 plus years. And that was really what kind of inspired the decision to get into ketamine. We went through COVID, all of us, right? Crisis. Whether you were on a certain political side or a healthcare side, it was certainly a challenging time. And what I found is that, crisis really strips back the facade. You get to see some will rise, right? Some will run. Some will fall. And for me personally, a lot of my colleagues and patients in the emergency department, we really got to see kind of healthcare laid bare. And in some situations, unfortunately, got to see a lack of support in some regards, a lack of support for patients, for staff, a lot of burnout, really kind of caused me to question what I was doing. I had some disillusionment, and I thought there's got to be a way to put patients first instead of profits over patients or other sort of agendas, right? And so I really wanted to get away from this transactional kind of relationship with my patients and really get into one that's more relational, where I could spend the time taking care of people, really get to understand who they are, but also as you're going through this stress and trauma of working in the emergency department, you're seeing terrible things, but you're also seeing wonderful things. And you're really getting to change people, change yourself by saving lives. And if I could do that same kind of positivity or practice in that positive way, but maybe not within that chaotic, stressful emergency department setting, would I be happier? And when I look at those areas of need that really just don't get serviced properly in the emergency department, behavioral health, chronic pain, right? And I've had friends and family members close to me that I've lost to suicide. So it's been another area that just really hits home and really has meant a lot to try and make a change in. And unfortunately, in the emergency department, you see the same patients years after year, year after year, suffering from the same problems without getting much benefit or moving forward. And when Harry approached me and said, "Hey, are you aware that there's this medicine ketamine that can help for really have unbelievable response for these patients with the same things that we're talking about now. Would you be interested in discussing and learning more and getting together to start a clinic?" And that's where it sprang from.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Hay. Yeah, that's amazing. And I can totally relate with my experience working in the emergency department. So I think you really hit the nail on the head with some of the challenges. I mean, I love emergency medicine. I think it's great. It's crucial, and we do help people. And I think there's a role for other modalities and specialized treatments and more relational, one-on-one, long-term care that may not necessarily be seen in the emergency department setting. So, yeah, I can totally relate. Thanks so much. And what about you, Dr. Pepper?
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having us on again. It's one of my favorite podcasts, so it's a real pleasure to be here with you. Yes, you're right. I am a psychologist with the last name of Pepper, so it is Dr. Pepper. I always get a lot of mileage out of that. Good for introducing myself. So I've been a psychologist for 30 years. I've worked in a lot of different settings. I worked in the Oberlin College Counseling Center for about 8 years. I had a private practice for 25 plus years. Worked in the nonprofit world doing leadership development and retreat work. I've been an executive coach doing leadership development kind of work as well. Job and family services. I worked in the prison system for a period of time doing a men's therapy support group in the prisons. And so just have had a variety of experiences as far as my background as a psychologist goes.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad both of you partnered up in creating this for our patients and clients. I'm curious, for both of you, like, was there a pivotal moment or experience where both or either of you thought, you know what? This is the moment that we are going to open up our practice and really start down this pathway. And so please share with us if, that what that pivotal moment was.
Yeah, Sam, I'll share two real quick moments. So one was about 5 years ago. I was in a continuing education course where they were talking about psychedelic therapies and how this was certainly the wave of the future. This is going to be the new frontier. And I have experience personally and professionally with psychedelics, so that wasn't new to me, and have done a lot of integration work with college students who certainly had been using psychedelics, oftentimes in the same ways, therapeutically, not recreationally. And so I was very excited to imagine a time when we would be able to use psychedelic therapies. And I remember distinctly the conversation about how psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, ayahuasca, all the medicines that were being talked about that day, in addition to ketamine, none of them legal. And how the ketamine provider said, and let's remember, this is the only psychedelic therapy currently legal in all 50 states. And so that stood out to me. And then, fast forward to today, all of those medicines that are still very promising, still illegal in all 50 states. So that was a big part of it. And then also the second piece was my own journey through long COVID. I had a very difficult time. There was a period of time I was not sure I was going to be able to work again full time, exhaustion, severe headaches, cognitive fog. And I did one MDMA guided session with a practitioner and never had any of my symptoms again. And so personally, that was a huge moment in time to say, okay, this is working. I know now how it's working for me. I want to share that with other people.
Wow. That's remarkable. Thank you for your vulnerability and your sharing, especially, it a lot of these psychedelics slash entheogenics are illegal. I know there's some changes occurring like in Oregon and Colorado and New Mexico. So that's quite promising as well as the research. But you're absolutely right. As far as all 50 states, ketamine is legal. Some people don't classify it as a psychedelic. They say, hey, that's not a classical psychedelic. And my, argument against that is, well, yeah, it may not be considered a classical psychedelic, but it's definitely an entheogenic, i.e., people are going to have non-ordinary states of consciousness with this medication, especially with the appropriate set and setting, which we can dive into later as far as, what that encompasses and how you both create that in your clinic. I'd love to hear, what was the pivotal moment for you when you were like, "Hey, I wanna go down this pathway?" I know you mentioned that Harry had reached out to you and told you, but, it's kind of a big leap in a way because if we have that stable job and everything's on cruise control, like, to do something independent can be challenging for some people.
Yeah, Harry had reached out to me in the fall of 2023 to discuss this. And Harry and I meet socially at least once a year to get together with a group of friends and catch up. And and I had actually been talking for a long time about something like this. And initially, our musings were, could we use cannabis in this manner? Long before it was legalized, just for everyone in the state of Ohio specifically, but also even medically legal in the state of Ohio. And then when he approached me about this and expressed to me that he had had experience with this and what he was seeing, it was something I kind of tucked in the back of my mind. And then we revisited it again. And at the time, I was the director at a small rural independent emergency department, small independent hospital. I mean, and I was just it was the 8th year. It was a lot of interactions where you just hear a lot of the complaints rather than the positives, and I just knew I needed to change, and I'd already made a decision that I was going to be cutting back on the number of shifts, and I was gonna be cutting back on the directorship at that time because I just felt like with my kids getting older, becoming teenagers, being more involved in activities, I really felt my schedule being pulled a lot of different ways, but also professionally, I just wasn't getting the nurturing from the work that I felt was important for me, and I wasn't the person at home with regards to my stress and time management that I wanted to be for my family, so I was already making a change, and the timing was interesting when Harry said, Let's pursue this." And I got to January of 2024 and made the decision to leave the directorship and actually stopped working in the ED for about 6 months while we worked on getting this clinic going.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, to really know yourself and the challenges and to know, "Hey, maybe my plate is getting a little too full, I need to switch things up." I think that's a very powerful personal insight. So, that's wonderful. And now you're both, running it, you're doing it, you're off to the races. What have been, kind of some of the major obstacles that you've faced? And this question is for both of you that you've faced as you're embarking down this adventure.
So I would say that I tend to be somebody who's very excited about getting to the work, and so as you know, and by the way, we had and continue to have a great experience with your ketamine startup program. I really highly recommend it to anyone looking to start up a ketamine business. And so, as you know, there's a lot of hurry up to wait. It's like, okay, hey, we got through this couple of things, and now what? Now we're waiting on the lawyers or the build out or this or that. And so I found that particularly difficult for me because I really wanted to just get to the point where we're seeing patients, we're seeing the results that we had been hearing so much about. And then I'll also say another challenge has been then when we opened our doors, we were surprised to kind of not have a flow of people walking right in the door ready for ketamine because again, we were seeing such amazing results. Even in our first clients, we're thinking this is just a matter of time before people are coming through the door. And that's been a little bit slower than we would hope. We are in Ohio, right? We're in the Midwest. A lot of people don't know what ketamine is. And so we're educating people. We're helping people address some misinformation, certainly that's out there, or myths. And so those have been some of the challenges that we've seen.
Really underestimating that timeline, right? We talked about how we thought, okay, well, if we're aware of this, there must be lots of people who are aware of this, right? And even now, as we approach our 1 year anniversary of opening on November 1st, we still get interactions where an anesthesiologist says, I didn't even know this was an application, right? Or we get someone who is a psychiatrist or a psychologist or counselor or therapist, and this is all new to them. And we did an in-service recently with a clinic where they had sort of heard some things, but really weren't certain, and just a lot of misinformation. But also the paradigm shift of replacing a daily pill with something that you get certain number of treatments, and then you may not need a treatment again, or may not need a treatment for 6 months. It almost sounds like, voodoo magic in
It's
some ways, and you
too
can
good to
see
be
or
true.
hear hear the people in their voices and their responses as if you're selling them a used car. And so it's really been a fun challenge to say, come in, commit to 2 sessions, because the first one, there's that fear of the unknown. When they get their second session, now they've gone through it and realized it's not what they thought it would be. And by the second one, they really see that benefit. That fear has melted away, and the efficiency, the effectiveness, the rapidity of the response is something that you really don't believe in because you've had such a different experience as you've gone through this process, especially with chronic pain, which is something that we had not really known much about until we took your course. I knew it was had pain benefit in the ER, but in terms of, the dosing and the structure, we've had just fantastic results with chronic pain patients, literally changing people's lives that didn't have hope that it would ever be any better. So
Yeah, it's so true because we know that this is a transformational medicine and it can be effective. And, when I started back in 2017, so that's what, about 8 years ago, I thought the same thing. I was like, yeah, the evidence is strong. We have randomized trials. Like, there's just going to be a line of patients. But it was not like that. And I think there's misinformation, there's myths, and in general, like, and this is fortunate or unfortunate, like sometimes healthcare is very slow to change. And I've mentioned in my other episodes that from the point of publishing something to actually being put into clinical practice, there's an average of 17 years for something to actually affect patients. And I'm like, wow, that is so slow. So I totally agree. Like, this educational piece is really crucial, and to let people know, hey, there's an alternative, there's something here. And it's quite different because you're right. Someone is not going to be taking a daily ketamine, on a regular basis. It might be where they do it a few times. Typically, we do 6 at our office over a period of 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, and they're good. I mean, we've had patients who've had remarkable results. But it is strange how it's like, yeah, people are not aware of it, and even psychiatrists are not aware of it. And I'm sure both of you know this already, but this is kind of like back in the 1950s and 60s when there was a lot of research being done in the psychedelic space with like Richard Alpert, Stan Groff, Timothy Leary, and it got a little bit out of control. And I know that, the restrictions came, but it's almost like there's a resurgence, and I think education and safety are really paramount.
Hey, listeners, this is Kim, and I just want to acknowledge that you're here for a reason. Maybe you're stuck in a cycle of long shifts, feeling a little burnt out, and wondering if there's any other way to practice medicine, especially on your own terms. We've been there, and that's exactly why we created this free checklist, your step-by-step roadmap to starting a ketamine clinic without those costly mistakes. Grab your copy now at www.ketaminestartup.com/checklist. It's completely free because we want you to succeed, not struggle. And hey, if you're driving or mid-workout, don't sweat it. Just check out the show notes for the link when you're ready. And again, that's www.ketaminestartup.com/checklist. Now let's get back to the episode.
For you and at your clinic, tell us a little bit about what your practice is like, how you ensure safety, some of the standards. Like, tell us the process that a patient would go through at your office.
one of the important things for us was that the first contact is with one or both of us. So we do not have an office manager or a secretary or someone else answering the phone. It's Harry and or I. We do the free consultations together. And part of that is because our practice approach is recognizing that while ketamine's a catalyst for change, the integrative coaching that Harry does is super important, not just for depth and duration, but really for impact. And so that's one thing. We provide a setting that is safe and that we have trauma-informed training. We have a private standalone building. We're not affiliated with any other group or practice, so we can really answer to ourselves as opposed to following someone else's standard. So we have private rooms, we have cardiac monitor, continuous pulse ox, blood pressure. We do thorough screening to make sure the patients are appropriate for the clinic and the treatment, as well as that we're a good fit for them, because we want it to be a two-way street where the patients are aligned in some of our values and how we approach the patient care. And then we offer the opportunity for them to collaborate in a little bit of their care with regards to the musical selection that Dr. Pepper curates on his carefully curated playlist. And we also make sure someone's in the room at all times. Every aspect of the patient experience, someone is with them from the time they walk in the door to get greeted to the time they, you know, we weigh them or start the IV or do the preparatory process at the beginning, our setting, or excuse me, our mindset, through the infusion itself, even to the time we do the post-infusion integration and help them, get up, get their belongings, and get out to the car. It's really someone accompanying them and guiding them along that journey, in addition to the guidance that occurs outside of the clinic with phone time or FaceTime, even just texting check-ins with Harry.
I'll just add a little bit there too. Between Jack and I, we have probably combined 55 to 60 years of professional experience working in the fields with emergency and crisis situations all the time. And so, I feel really confident about our combined ability to really address any contingency that comes through the door, that being psychological or medical and physical. And I think that's very reassuring to people when they're kind of like, hey, what is this ketamine thing? I'm not sure what it is. When we can say, hey, look at who we are, look at the work we've been doing, I think that gives them, a lot of comfort and feeling of safety.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful partnership that where you have the emergency physician and the psychologist partnering in this venture, you leveraging each of your unique skills and strengths to really have that team-based approach that I think makes it even stronger. So I'm so glad that both of you are working together in this. And I know Dr. Pepper and I were kind of chatting offline or emailing offline, and I would love to hear about two things from you. Number one is the coaching, integration coaching that you do, and then also I wanted to ask you about the music because I know we had connected briefly about that. So please share with us.
I appreciate that and have a lot of passion for both of those aspects of what we're doing. In fact, I like to say to friends and family that I feel like I get to do these days all the parts of my job and career that I really love and enjoy, kind of all in the same way, right? The same experience. So the leadership development, we have a second business that me and my partner Karen own. We call that Infinite Leadership, and that is a business that really supports the ketamine clinic with a lot of the integration work, the coaching, and so forth. We do some things that are independent of ketamine as well, but we're really focused on a vertical stage development model. And I've heard a few of your other guests, I think it was Mike Margolis, talk a little bit about this notion of how to create environments where people are encouraged to thrive within certain work organizations. And what we find is that there is in this approach to leadership a way in which trauma comes into play. There's a book called The Elevated Leader by Ryan Gottfredson, and he speaks very specifically of this and the way in which trauma experiences that we've all had inform how we perceive reality and how limited our self-limiting beliefs about maybe how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive the world, how we perceive others come into play. And so what I found inevitably in my work with leaders over 15 years is that we would frequently bump up against those things, right? We kind of bump up against, okay, well, I have this feeling of threat, even though there's no evidence to support the fact that I should be responding in threat. And so what I saw was this survival response. It's a survival response in the nervous system. And so now what we found is when we do the ketamine work, I like to talk to our clients and patients about perceiving this through the lens of trauma-informed leadership development. So they begin to think about, okay, what are the things I really care about? Passion, my sense of purpose and values. Am I living in alignment with these things? Meaningful connections in my life. Am I close with people in my life? Do I feel like I want to bring those relationships even into greater depth? Having greater intimacy in these connections. So we do tend to look at things through that lens of leadership development, as opposed to kind of a standard behavioral health model. I say to people a lot, I find that I'm doing much more coaching than therapy these days, because of that. And then I'll speak to the music, unless you had something
Yeah,
you want.
actually, I had a question. So for we have our listeners and some are psychologists and therapists, and then we also have some people who are coaches. So from your perspective, Dr. Pepper, what is the difference between therapy and coaching?
It's a great question, and I get that question a lot. Here's what I'll say. I think, therapy, one of the aspects of therapy that I find, um identifiable with therapy is that frequently we talk about the past. So we're sort of like, okay, we're going to go into the past. We're going to talk about the past, how these things that happened to you in your life cause you to respond or behave in a certain way today. And I think there's relevancy to that. But honestly, and I say this with all respect to therapists, I am one. I think it's only modestly helpful to know, like, okay, so when I was 6 years old, this thing happened, and now I have this perception of reality or threat, and I respond to things in a certain way. I often find that that insight often isn't enough to change the patterns, and what we know now about the body keeps the score, some of Bessel's work, that really this stuff, the trauma lives in the body. So I find that the coaching is more of a, we like to say at the clinic, present moment forward sort of orientation. How are you right now? In fact, I will ask that question, like when we're just about to do an infusion. So how are you feeling, or what are you noticing right now, to get them really into the present moment and into their body? And then when we talk about intention, we talk about what is it that you want, rather than, oh, I want to be less depressed or less anxious. I want my PTSD symptoms to dissipate. Okay, fine. But what's on the other side of that? And a lot of times our clients will look at me like, I don't know. I've not even really thought about, what's on the other side. So we might talk about joy or peace or serenity. These are things that people really want, but they often haven't really verbalized it. So to me, a quick response is kind of, that's what I see different between the therapy and the what I call the coaching.
Yeah, and I want to comment on that because that's really powerful. Is in the medical setting, and Dr. Hay and I know this, and I don't know if when we're writing notes, we always start with chief complaint and then a SOAP note: subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. So that's kind of our standard. And I like what you said, Dr. Pepper, because I mean, chief complaint, that inherently suggests that there is always a problem, right? The complaint. So, what if instead we said, what's your chief goal or chief intention, right? And have that be the starting place rather than the problem. And I think the way you articulated, hey, what is it, moving forward? What are you feeling now? And what is it that you want moving forward? That's just it's a paradigm shift. It's a very subtle, going from chief complaint to chief goal or chief intention, but I think it can be really powerful.
It is, and, we've done Jack and I have had some great success with a few combat veterans who are dealing with complex PTSD, and they've witnessed some horrific things, and they'll come in and they'll say, "I'm really terrified that you're gonna ask me to talk about my traumas." And I quickly say to them, "You can share with us whatever you want. We're available for that." But there is often no need for you to share those stories, because of the ketamine, what's happening with the ketamine, what we're doing in the coaching and focused on intention and music, we just find that it's just really not necessary. And they are, of course, very relieved to learn that they don't have to sort of relive those experiences.
And I just want to share part of the approach that we take, some little nuances that we've added on our own, is when we discuss that intention, we empower the patient then to pick a color that's powerful for them and write that intention on a whiteboard. And then we hang that intention, that whiteboard in front of them as we move forward through that process. And then we take a picture. Typically, Harry will take a picture of their intention and then text it to them, in addition to providing the playlist. So as they move forward, as we wrap things up in the clinic, we want to be mindful of that intention and moving forward. And it's amazing how many times during the intake process, we will do this to a smaller extent, really for the first time, ask them about their intention. And often they will stumble and pause. Some get it, they jump right into it. But sometimes they really think, and eventually we have the conversation like, it's hard for me to have hope and positivity. I just focus on the negative. Like when you're studying for a test, you're just always reading the same thing over and over again. Well, if that studying in your life is just the trauma, the negativity, the stuff you don't want to experience, it's really hard for you to all of a sudden say, what do I want to be? What's on the other side of that? And so it's that process begins in the consultation. It continues through the sessions that really seems to be powerful and helpful for the patients,
And
taking that attention and integrating, yeah.
I just want to add to that because that was Jack's idea originally about their race board, and I just thought it was excellent. And then you have the embodiment of them writing it out. Another piece that adds is it's in the room, so me and Jack and our nurses are all kind of on board with the intention that's happening in the infusion. So it's almost like a theme in the room, so I feel like that's quite another powerful part of what we're getting connected to.
Yeah, and it just made me think as you were both speaking about a metaphor or an analogy where let's say that there's a patient and they have a flashlight and whatever they point that flashlight is what they're focusing on. It's a dark room, and so they can either point that flashlight at all of their problems and focusing on my PTSD or anxiety, or they can take that same flashlight and focus it and move it towards what they want and where they want to go. And I think having it on a erase board, like that's a beautiful way to remind not only the patient, but also all the people inside of the room, i.e., staff members, clinicians, et cetera, that, hey, this is the patient's intention. And I think, yeah, there's some magic happening. Definitely, I can sense that and tell based upon your experience and what you're describing with the intention and the board. I love that addition, guys. I do want to jump into the music because this is really integral. I feel like the music, what I've seen at our office is, I mean, it just plays such an integral role. And it's funny, earlier in a previous episode, we had Stephen Gelberg, who wrote a book, Tuning In, Experiencing Music in Psychedelic States. And he was a big proponent of music selection and how that impacts the experience. And I think the music in general, like over the past 30 to 40, 50 years since the 1950s and 60s, when they were doing the psychedelic legal work back in the days, like that would play a role. So tell us about your music process and the selection there and what you've noticed.
Yeah, so I have a lot of passion and excitement to share about the music. So, in addition to being a psychologist, I'm a musician, and I've been playing the drums since second grade. I've recently, since COVID, started to play guitar as well, and have performed for very large numbers of people before, and so that's been kind of a part of my life for many years. In fact, I recall a time when I was trying to decide between, do I want to go down this healing path or down this music path? And a friend reminded me, well, why not just do both? And I really do feel like that's kind of what's happening with the ketamine. Um, so, Sam, as well as I do, that there's a lot of recommendations about the music being kind of ambient, no lyrics unless it's not in your native language. These were all the recommendations that we were given coming into this. And as a musician, I just thought, that's just not right. You know,
Tell us
people
more.
want to right? People want to connect to the music that they really care about, right? There's this unconscious and even conscious relationship we have to the music that we love, the music that we've grown up with. meaningful times in our life that kind of almost like the soundtrack to our lives in a sense, right? And so what I found is by talking to people about the music, it brings alive a whole lot of things that they are willing to share without necessarily saying a lot of detail about their life. They'll say, "Oh, my dad really loved this song," or, "He recently passed and, he reminds me of him," or whatever it might be. So there's all these sort of connections that people have. So what happens is I curate a playlist, each person, each infusion that is specifically curated for them. I have 70% of that I kind of work out. It's a combination of hemi-sync music or binaural beats, certain classic songs that people know and are familiar with. And I have used lyrics from the beginning, and I find that it works beautifully well. And then 30% of that curated list are things that maybe they have talked about, maybe a song that's very meaningful to them, or an artist that maybe they loved through high school or something, and they just feel really connected to that. And so, what I find is the combination of the predictability and then the unexpected, right? So, whoa, wow, that song, I haven't heard that song in forever. And now in the ketamine experience, it's taking on a whole new meaning for me. And so people have emotional releases related to the music. I send them the playlist like we do with the intention. So I send them the playlist. So then they're listening to this playlist curated for them by me. That often helps sort of reconnect to some of the ketamine effect. We know that the effects of some of the neuroplasticity opportunities continue for days after. So they're really connecting to the music. And then what we do is each time we'll talk again about music. So I might even ask them the day of their infusion, "Hey, is there any music that's kind of really coming up for you lately?" "Oh yeah, hey, there's this song. It's a wild thing. I was driving here and the song came on and it reminded me." And I'll ask them, "Would you like me to put it in the playlist?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, I would." And so I'll insert it, take something else out, put it in, and there's something about trusting the individual's connection to the music that we find very powerful and has a very synergistic effect with the ketamine.
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you. And I think there's a quote that says, "Music is the language of the soul." And for me, that quote really resonates because music can help us express emotions that, I mean, we're limited by our words and our vocabulary. And sometimes it just can't be expressed verbally in, normal language. And we need, drums or guitar or cello or whatever it may be to really express that and feel it. Um, the other thing is, have you ever heard of a term called frisson? Frisson, frisson.
Mm,
It's the term where, okay, so have you ever listened to a piece of music and then, and some people don't experience this, but sometimes we'll hear a piece of music or a song, and then we'll get like shivers down our spine, and it's like, oh yeah, there's something, and it's just emotionally moving.
yes.
And for some people, it could be, let's say there's a veteran, it could be the Star Spangled Banner. I mean, just doesn't that same song doesn't apply to everyone, but for some reason, there's certain songs that are like a key that unlocks the nervous system, and it's just like, I just feel like, the shivers. And anyways, that's referred to as frisson, frisson. And I think that the frisson is a signal that we're on the right path.
Yes.
And it's like, yep, something about the song, and we can. It's just speaking to my soul. I don't know why, but it is. I'm feeling some sort of physiological response, and I think there's a key in relationship with healing there.
Yeah, exactly. And we have one quick example that I'd like to share. So as we ventured down this journey, kind of going a little bit off the beaten path, every time I'd say, "Well, how was the music?" Kind of expecting like, "Whoa, that was too much," or whatever. Every time people are like, "Oh my gosh, perfect. That was amazing." So we kind of kept building this model. And then we had a police officer who was coming in for some PTSD treatment, and he says to me, "Well, one of my favorites is Eminem, and it's kind of some violent energy and this, and like, would that be a good ketamine song? Would that make sense to put it in the playlist? And I said, well, what do you think? Right? So I often will turn it back to the client. And he looked at me, he paused, and he said, I think yes, let's put it in. So I said, okay, let's try it. And he, to this day, said that was like totally transformative for him because this song that had been a song he had worked out to and he had felt this kind of fiercely protective energy transformed into something completely new. And now he has a whole different relationship with that aspect of himself. In fact, I see it a lot through the lens of parts work, internal family systems and some of that. It's almost as if different parts of us respond to different music. And so I feel like, hey, if the person themselves is saying, yeah, put in the Eminem or the Nine Inch Nails or whatever it might be, and I say, who am I to say no? I'm going to try it and see. And every time they say, yeah, that was amazing.
Wow. So I love it. You're challenging the whole Stan Groff lyric stuff, and you're putting in Eminem and Nine Inch Nails. But I love it because you're you're putting it on, but it's actually the patient's putting it on
That's
because
right.
you're asking them, "Hey, what do you think? Do you think we should put in Eminem? Like, what are your thoughts? What's that part of you need?" And I think that's the crucial distinction is it's not the psychologist or the doctor or clinician saying, "Hey, you need this type of music." It's saying, "Well, what do you think you need?" And
Exactly right.
that kind of challenges, I don't know, sometimes in medicine, we call it the paternalistic model where we're like, "Yep, I'm the doctor. I know exactly what you need. You're gonna do X, Y, and Z." And that's the way it historically was. I mean, now we're switching, but I love how you're letting the patients have more autonomy in their own healing process.
And there is another quick example that I thought was very standout here. Recently, we had a woman client who said, and please no classical. And
Mm.
because that's another thing that I was told, oh, classical music is great, right? And I asked her, I said, well, curious to know why no classical. And she said, well, I'm classically trained. And that if I was listening to classical music, I would be analyzing and I wouldn't be able to relax. And I thought, "Oh my gosh, like what a simple conversation about classical music." And then I've said, "Of course, we won't put any classical." And she's like, "Thank you, thank you." So again, if we went with sort of the common wisdom around ketamine, we'd say, okay, well, fill it with some classical music, not really knowing or expecting that those patients might be disrupted by the classical rather than supported.
That's so true. Thank you. So I'm curious for I mean, both of you, but I'll start with Dr. Hay. Let's say that there's another clinician, a physician who's like, "Hey, I'm really interested in opening up a ketamine clinic." Based upon your experience, what's one piece of advice that you would offer to anyone who's looking to open up their own practice?
So I have 3 things that I like to tell people when they ask me kinda how it's going, especially those physicians who are maybe in the midlife, considering a career change, curious to know, why I did what I did. And I think the first is passion. You really have to have a passion for what you're doing to be involved in ketamine infusions. There's a shamanic transfer of energy that occurs during these sessions. I routinely leave the clinic feeling this positive energy that is something I just haven't felt since I was really young and first got into healthcare as a student and as an early trainee. And the second thing is you really have to be patient because it's gonna take time for things to grow. A quote I love is from Socrates. It says, "The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new." And when you're at the forefront of a paradigm shift, which I really believe, Sam, you and others that have come before us, and I believe Harry and I and the way we are doing things differently at the clinic, not just from music, but in terms of some of the diagnoses that we are starting to expand into, that we really are at this paradigm shift for good, for positivity, right? And so we really want to build on the new and work forward, but that is a slow process. You want to turn a big ship, you turn the wheel and you wait a long time to see any movement, right? And then perseverance. because you're going to have challenges. You talk routinely on your podcasts, and your guests talk about the challenges that you face. I mean, this summer, this year, 2025, for Sam Coe and Kim Coe, what a tremendous challenge, my goodness. And here you are persevering, not just with a podcast, but I see you regularly continue to promote, continue to discuss, and then share your own emotional story. Show that vulnerability as a way to say, everybody hurts, right? Like the REM song, everybody hurts, but we can all be healed inside and outside. And that's just really a special thing to see how, when you decide to go down this route, if you have passion, if you have patience, and you have perseverance, you can be a change engine. And I think that those of us who are following your footsteps appreciate the hard work that you've done and being a leader out at the forefront in all those ways I just described.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that. The 3 Ps by Dr. Hay: passion, patience, perseverance.
A
And
fourth P is Dr. Pepper.
all right, speaking of
You have
Dr.
some Dr.
Pepper,
Pepper in your life.
yeah, I gotta get some Dr. Pepper. It's one of my favorite sodas.
Me too, actually.
So Dr. Pepper, tell us what's some advice that you'd give for a clinician who's embarking down this journey?
First of all, just have to say I'm kind of flashing back to walking. Me and my partner Karen live very close to Lake Erie in Cleveland. It's a beautiful space, and frequently will walk at a park near the lake and listen to your podcasts. And how often we would be kind of in the thick of something difficult, and there you would be like, "Hey, hang in there. It's gonna change." A lot of the things, and I just want to say again how im important that has been for me and Jack, but me personally, to just kind of keep going in these times. So what I would say is, don't give up. It's a simple, again, if we want to make a music reference, Peter Gabriel's song, "Don't Give Up." I listen to it frequently in the year of our build out and construction and all of that, and some of the challenges, the typical challenges with starting a business, 2 businesses in my case. And so, yeah, there's just something about calling on these parts of us that say, "Hey, you know what? I really believe that this is gonna make a difference in people's lives." It's that value system. You and Kim talk a lot about being connected to your value system, and I don't know any other way. I to get through some of those really difficult points, that was what kept me going, is like, "Hey, on the other side of this, we're gonna help a lot of people," and that's what kept me going, and now we're seeing that. I mean, truly, every day, every week, we're like, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible work." It feels like a blessing to be part of it, but don't give up. That's would be my recommendation.
And, I actually really appreciate that because, for those of you who are listening and don't know, Kim and our clinic got, damaged by a bomb, believe it or not, in the middle of Palm Springs, downtown Palm Springs. We were about 150 feet away from a terrorist suicide bombing explosion that impacted our clinic. And it really, I mean, it threw us for a loop and it still does. And there's been moments where I'm like, man, like starting up a business, running a business, seeing patients, like all the work, like it's hard. And then to throw on a bombing, it just amplified it
Yeah.
1,000x. So there have been moments where I'm like, man, maybe we should just give up. There's a part of me. And it went back down to my why and my purpose. Like, well,
Mm.
why am I doing this? Why are we working so hard? Why, like, because for everyone here, we all have a backup plan. Like, hey, Dr. Hay could always go back and work full time in the emergency department. Like that's our safety net. I could go back and work full time in the ER, be some administrator. Like it's not a bad backup plan. It's a safety net. You, Dr. Pepper, you could go back and start, do full time psychology or coaching or whatever. Like everyone has a backup plan, but it's like, well, why am I doing this really hard thing? And it went down to my purpose of my passion and why. And I think there's going to be challenges and obstacles. It may not be a bomb. It may be some paperwork or some legal thing or I don't know, some building rehab or reconstruction, but there's always going to be challenges. And I think when we have that strong why, like that's going to lead me through it. And that's what's helped me is like going back. What's my purpose? Why am I here? Why do I exist? And this has really kind of been my driving force and kind of my resilience underneath of it all.
I know you had asked us to write about our why in the course, and I will still go back. I decided to handwrite it. I find that sometimes writing with my hand, one of those people, sometimes that I'll still go back to that writing and remind myself, okay, yep, I'm right on track. This is why I'm doing all of this. So, yeah, that was a great exercise.
Wonderful. Thank you for listening and thank you for doing that why exercise. I want to ask y'all some fun questions just to shift gears and just to get to know you a little bit better. So I'll ask the question and then both of you can answer it. So the first one is if you could only have one book, one movie, and one type of food with you on a deserted island, what would those be? One book, one movie, and one type of food. And whoever wants to start.
The book, the Lord of the Rings books, I know it's a trilogy, so if I had to pick one, it'd be the Return of the King, but I love those books. I'm a huge sci-fi fantasy genre individual, so even though people have critiques about the movies, it was just great to see that imagery come to the big screen in the way in which it did, just really, really fantastic, and I'm a huge Star Wars geek. I mean, the kids roll my eyes. My wife says, "Would you forget how the movie ends? The Empire Strikes Back." I could watch that a million times. And food, seafood. Um, I, whenever I can find some place here in the Midwest that I feel like has well prepared, fresh seafood, I try and bundle up everybody and get my family to go out, or at least get the wife and I to go out. So
And I want to clarify, I love seafood myself. What is it? Do you like the salmon, the oysters, the lobsters? What's your go-to seafood?
Sam,
Or
I like it all. It does not matter. I'll try anything. Like I got to go to Spain and try the way in which with some Portuguese influence how they do squid. Growing up in Southern California, my first time ever having clam chowder was a Manhattan clam chowder at a little place in Newport Beach where you get plastic utensils and paper plates. And just growing up near the coast and then subsequently moving out to living in Chicago and here in Ohio where there is freshwater lakes, and you get all kinds of different fresh freshwater fish to try, as well as not too many people eat it. Rainbow trout, they call it out there. It's called steelhead here, but love it all.
I love rainbow trout. It's so good. I grew up in Idaho and we would go fishing and we would catch rainbow trout, perch, and bass. So yeah, it brings back fond memories. Rainbow trout, it's delicious. All right, how about you, Dr. Pepper? Your go-to book, movie, and type of food on a deserted island.
So, again, as a fan of the podcast, I was a little prepared for this one. Been thinking about it for a while if I ever was here. So the book is called You Are Enough, and it's written by an author by the name of Panache Desai. And the reason I would choose that book is it's a book I can read many times over and still get something new from it. In fact, there's a chapter in that book on trust and surrender that I think I probably read 30 times, especially in this process of starting up these businesses. So that would be my book. A movie, I thought about this a little bit, and lately I'm kind of thinking it would be Grand Canyon. It was a movie that was put out in the early 90s. Lawrence Kasdan directed, and it's just about making choices in life and how we make choices about what's important in life. And it just feels like a movie that I've seen a few times and I could watch it again and again on a deserted island and get something else out of it. And food is easy for me, pizza. I feel like it's just maybe degrees of how good the pizza is, but I'm pretty much happy with anything pizza related.
Is there a favorite topping you go for, like Hawaiian, vegetarian, all meat?
I guess if I had to pick, again, deserted island, it would be pepperoni and black olive. Something
Okay,
about that
classic.
combination that I really like.
Yeah. And what I love about these questions and the responses is that they actually give me ideas. Sometimes, like, I don't know, maybe I'll watch Grand Canyon tonight, or maybe I'll watch Lord of the Rings again. So it's just a fun way for me to expand my knowledge base as well as this book, You Are Enough, because I've never heard of it.
Mm.
So thank you for sharing that. And I also love pizza. I used to work at a pizza place when I was in high school. It was an Italian restaurant, and they taught us how to make pizza, like, I mean, from scratch, pizza dough, how to throw pizza. Like, I know how to throw, like, what was the largest size? I think it was a 22-incher,
Wow,
something like that, like how to throw pizza dough and everything. So thanks for sharing that.
great.
Next question is, after a long day of work, what is your go-to way to just relax, de-stress, chill out? I'll start with Dr. Hay.
During COVID, when everything was shut down, we decided to redo our backyard and kind of create a little personal oasis. My kids tease me that it's the dad cave. But it's really for everybody, you know. And it's an outdoor space. We were fortunate enough to have a reasonably sized property with no fences, so we can kind of look out along the shared backyards and enjoy this oasis. My wife works hard to maintain the plants and the trees and the flowers. And it's a peaceful space where we get a nice breeze. She has wind chimes set up that play some gentle music in the background. Here in my office, you probably can't hear it. I can hear it, but I doubt it comes through in the podcast. But they're chiming and playing different tones, like different size, different lengths, make different tones of music. And I will often sit out there if I feel like watching a documentary or a movie. I have a space that's covered, so I could be there even in the winter, as long as I wear something warm to watch, or we have a little fire pit and a little hot tub, and it's just sort of a way to get outside because we're always working these 9 to 5, 7 to 7 hours, right? Not always able to enjoy the benefits of being outside during the day. So I try and capture that at night, or if I've worked a night shift in the ER, try and do that during the day as well.
And I'll say for me, 2 things. Playing guitar, like I said, I started really playing guitar during COVID, and, I always said I would play someday, and, I bought a guitar. In fact, I was playing in a band many years ago as the drummer in a band, and I bought our guitar player's guitar because he was gonna sell it, and I said, "Hey, I'm interested," and then it just sat for, I don't even know, 10 years. So playing guitar, and then I'll also say laying in the hammock. So this year it's been hammock therapy, I call it, where I just lay in the hammock and I don't think about anything, do anything, just lay there, and it is really very, renewing, refreshing, right? Reset, talk about reset ketamine,
Yeah.
right? It's my reset is to be in the hammock.
Thank you. Next question is regarding your hidden talents. And I know, Dr. Pepper, you already mentioned the guitar, but the question is, do you have a hidden talent or hobby that most people would be surprised to learn about?
I guess I will say the music thing. I mean, now certainly I've talked a little bit about it, but I think a lot of times that is something surprising to people when they hear, I've performed for 10,000, 20,000 people before. And so,
Wow.
I was really doing the music thing for a while in a way that was, um, yeah, it was very successful and I enjoyed it and love aspects of that. So yeah, I would say all aspects of music, even getting into the geeky side of the sound engineering. Lately, I've been like so interested to learn more about how to, dial in sounds. So I would say that would be my hidden talent in that regard.
Thank you. What about you, Dr. Hay? What's your hidden talent or hobby that most people would be
So
surprised?
because I don't do it as much anymore, I did it a lot more when I was younger. And it's not that I don't want to, I just feel like I don't have a lot of that time to express myself that way. I'm actually a pretty good artist, draw and paint. My mom surprised me. She and my dad, they're not hoarders, but they like to keep stuff and collect stuff. I mean, we're talking about like something I drew in first grade, right? So they brought a bunch of stuff. They come from California, Ohio to see us, and they brought a bunch of things from home every time they come out. And one year they coordinated my wife and my mother to take a bunch of the art that I had produced from middle school through high school and college and got it framed
Mm.
and then put it in a hallway upstairs at our house without me being aware of it. And it was really cool to like come up the stairs and see these pictures that I had drawn or these paintings that I had done, as a younger person. They're prominently displayed, and especially if you see my handwriting, you'd say there's just no way you could draw or paint, but that's something I don't think really very many people know. I don't even know if Harry knew that.
I don't know that. This is new. Yeah.
That's so cool. And one of the underlying themes that I'm noticing here is both of you are at the core artists, maybe visual art, painting, drawing, musical art. And what's cool about opening up your own practice, to me, it's an art. When they say they call it the art of medicine, but there's an art to opening up a business and like the way we structure it and do it and create it and put intentions on a erase board or the music. Like this is actually, in a way, a manifestation for me when I think about like, hey, this is the artist side, the creative side coming out, because not every clinic is going to be the same. Like clinics are all different and it's influenced by the people who create it. And I think it's really cool is that both of you have that foundation as an artist that is flowing out from within and into the reality of the world.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for that. Yeah, there's actually a program that we offer called The Art of Mastering Fear. And it's kind of that whole idea, this notion that leaders are not fearless, but rather courageous, right?
Hmm.
And so given the fact that we're all acknowledging certain level of fear when we're being innovative or pioneering, how do we really the artistic side of mastering that fear, not letting it limit us, is something that we care a lot about, obviously, with the ketamine therapy approach.
All right. A few more questions. And the next one is it's regarding time travel. I really like the Back to the Future series, part 1, 2, and 3. So let's say you could go back in time for a day. Where and when would you go? And I'll start with Jack, time traveling. And I'm even gonna say, yeah, anytime. Some people they'll say, "Hey, what about the future?" I say, "Okay, fine. If you do have the DeLorean, where do you want to go?" But for you, where would you go? Where and when?
I would definitely wanna go into the future. I mean, I really am intrigued with all that's going on, and not just the return to the moon, but missions to Mars and what else is out there. And, so I think that if there's a future where we have the opportunity to travel other places and meet other, um, species, individuals, if you will, right? I think that'd be really interesting. Not that there's anything against this group, but I look at the diversity of the planet. I can't help but think in this universe, there wouldn't be an amazing amount of diversity in the universe too. We just need the technology to get there, right? Share that.
Totally, I love it. That's a great answer.
And I'm going to choose a historic moment. I would like to be in the crowd, the 250,000 people who heard Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. I've certainly heard it many times. I'm guessing that many of us have, but to be there, this feels like something that, would be so inspiring to be with other people, hearing that transformative speech at the time. And I think about where we're at right now in our country and our culture, just how powerful that must have been to physically be there in that group of people.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for your time. I know the sun is setting on our conversation, but I do have one last question, and that is where can people learn more about you, your clinic? What's the social medias, websites? Please share that information so people can connect and learn about Oberlin Ketamine Clinic.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. The website is Oberlin, which is Oberlin, ketamine.com. Facebook is the same. And then our Instagram is Heal with OKC, HEAL with OKC.
And I'll also add the Infinite Leadership business, and that website is www.infinite-leaders.com. And somebody could go there to learn more about what we're doing in that leadership center, trauma-informed, looking at music, these kinds of things through that leadership lens.
Yeah, and we'll put all of those links in the show notes. So if you're not able to get that audio portion, then it'll be in the show notes. That will definitely include those links. And I just want to conclude by saying thank you both. It's an honor to have worked with you and to see the growth that has transpired and to see the clinic up and running. I I really value the integrity and the diligence that you've put in. I haven't personally been to your office, but the way you describe it and the way it's being done, it makes me either want to A, go there myself, or B, refer patients to go to your clinic, because we know that there's a lot of clinics out there, and everyone has varying degrees of how they do it. Again, it's like that art metaphor, but I think the art that you've created, this just sounds amazing and very healing, trauma informed, leadership focused. It has the whole package. So it's an honor to see both of your work, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you for saying that, Sam. That means a lot. We have considered you and Kim mentors in this process. So again, it means a lot to us to hear that from you. And we're hoping to see you in Austin at the ASKP3. If it's in Austin again, we're hoping to get there this January.
Yeah, thanks again, Sam. Really appreciate all that you've done. The course, for anyone who's considering this, is just invaluable. The amount of information and support. I Harry and I did another video where it just not only saved hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars, but just really well done, really supportive from actually the way in which the information is conveyed. Not a traditional teaching model, but almost like you're having a conversation with a good friend who's saying, hey, what do you think of this? You know, you don't know if you're talking about the Dodgers or the Browns or music or theater, and really what you're talking about is, hey, how, this is what I do if I was starting up a ketamine business, and with a lot of support, though, a lot of um, tears and sweat and reasons for the decisions that are being made, and a nice inclusion of things to avoid and not do. So really, really great course.
Thank you both so much for the acknowledgement. And yeah, thank you for your time. And thank you for all the listeners who've stayed till the very end. It says a lot about you. And we're excited to connect with you on the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ketamine Startup Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps other entrepreneurial medical professionals like you discover the show and grow our community. You can find all the show notes, resources, and links at ketaminestartup.com/podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.